everybody, welcome to the channel. Hey guys, we're your hosts, M and J, and today we're going to be talking about the finale of season 1 of Netflix's She-Ra. In our opinion, this finale is done very by the numbers. Everything that happens in it feels like it's what you would expect would happen in a finale for a show like this. The setup throughout the season was very lackluster, and that ultimately made the payoff pretty underwhelming. The emotional impact that probably should have been there was ultimately missing because of it. The story beats of this episode were pretty predictable. Every time you'd expect something to happen, it happened. So there wasn't really anything that was surprising about this finale. And I think that combined with the lackluster setup ultimately led to a disappointing final episode for this season. This episode begins showing how chaotic Etheria is becoming. The Whispering Woods are freezing over, and She-Ra realizes that this is coming from the Fright Zone, so whatever is happening, the Horde must be involved. Glimmer says they need to get back to Bright Moon because she's worried about everyone there. This series doesn't have the best continuity, and it shows in this episode too. In the previous episode, She-Ra was the one in front when they were riding Swiftwind, but now she's in the back. It's a small detail, but when you're watching these episodes back to back, it can be pretty distracting. In the Fright Zone, Catra and Entrapta are very happy with what's happening, but Scorpia seems a little concerned. Entrapta is celebrating the success of her experiment by whirling around the black garnet in her chair, and I don't know how she's doing that with cords on the floor, but I guess that's not all that important. She explains that the black garnet is sapping powers from the other rune stones, which is disrupting the balance, and that's why the weather's going crazy. She also explains that this is going to negatively affect the other princesses, specifically the elemental princesses, the ones who are connected to their rune stones, because she never had a rune stone, and Scorpia either lost her connection to the black garnet or she was never connected in the first place, so neither of them will be affected. Scorpia does appear in the elemental princess lineup that Lighthope showed Adora in the Crystal Castle, so she must still have some kind of connection to the rune stone, or at the very least is important to the balance of Etheria, and they're just recognizing that. Entrapta doesn't appear at all, so I guess that means that not all rulers are connected to Etheria. So Drill doesn't have a rune stone, but that doesn't mean that they're not being affected by this. This is affecting all of Etheria, and Entrapta doesn't think about her people or her kingdom at all. This whole time she never brings them up. Drill must be going through a really hard time right now. They lost their princess, who they didn't necessarily have a great relationship with in the first place, but she was still their princess and their leader. And on top of that, this is the end of the world as they know it, and as far as we know, they have no leadership. I think it would have been interesting if they had confirmed that Drill was now under Horde control, and maybe we could have gotten something with the kitchen staff, considering the fact that they were loyal to the rebellion. I mean, there's a lot you can do with this plot point, but instead the show completely ignores it. Also, does that mean Entrapta's hair isn't magic, or that it's just not elemental magic? Because she's the only character that seems to have this attribute. Is it just hereditary that she inherited from her family, or is it a muscle? I don't know, it just would have been nice to get some clarification on that. Catra asks Entrapta how they can make the effects on Etheria permanent, while she breaks one of the bulbs connected to the model of the planet she made. This causes a reaction on the model, basically implying that if they destroy one runestone, it'll cause possibly irreparable damage to the balance of Etheria. So Catra decides to scramble a strike team to attack Bright Moon in the hopes of destroying their runestone. Does Hordak know about this? Cause it doesn't seem like they got clearance with him to do this. Sometimes I wonder why they even bother having a big bad in this show if they're just gonna focus so much on Catra and she's basically just doing whatever she wants. Also, why would they want to destroy the Moonstone? Why don't they just conquer Bright Moon and then capture the Moonstone to use for their own purposes? It seems kind of like a waste to destroy it. They could just use it like they're using the Black Garnet. On top of that, how do they know throwing the world out of balance is really a good idea? What if they end up destroying the world in the process? Is that really what they want? This seems like not a great plan in the long term. Why don't they just conquer Bright Moon, take the Moonstone for themselves, capture everyone and brainwash them into being their loyal subjects, and call it a day? That way they don't have to live in a world with no food. Because how are they gonna grow crops in a world that's bathed in eternal darkness? Queen Angela lights the distress beacon, which the best friend squad is able to use to get back to Bright Moon because they got turned around in the storm. Angela tells them that the Moonstone is using all its power to try to counteract what's happening, but it isn't enough. And Adora realizes that with the Whispering Woods frozen over, there's nothing to protect Bright Moon from a Horde attack, so they need to prepare. In the war room, Bo informs everyone that their scouts have seen the Horde army advancing on Bright Moon, but also hopes that people will come because of the distress beacon. However, Adora points out that the other princesses have their own kingdoms to protect, so it's really unlikely that anyone is going to come. Only for one of the royal guards to come in saying that someone has come. Bo excitedly asks if it's the princesses, and it turns out it is the princesses, but not the ones that Bo wanted to see. It's Natasa and Spinnerella, who are finally being included after 13 episodes of this season. Bo's face when he sees them is so disappointed. This is a pretty dire situation, Bo. Why are you so upset? You'd think he'd be willing to take all the help he can get. He tries to play it off by telling them, "Oh, thanks for coming, guys." But Natasa isn't buying it. She calls him out on the fact that he still doesn't know what they do. And Natasa says that it's literally in her name, Net Tasa. She tosses nets. Really, all of them have obvious names. So she is right. Bo really should have known this. Bo is an archer. Glimmer has sparkle powers. Frost has ice powers. We don't need to go on. Spinnerella says, "Yes, darling, you toss beautiful nets," to Natasa. This is the only line that Spinnerella gets this entire season. Really, they both finally get the chance to speak, and this is all they get to say. Natasa does have a few more lines in this episode, but they're nothing particularly meaningful. These two characters have been around since episode 4, and there was a lot of opportunity to include them in this season, but every chance that the creators got, they just didn't take. They've never had a chance to even have a speaking line until this point. Despite the fact that they've been the most loyal to their cause, they stayed with the rebellion when everyone else left. Their pictures even appear on the mural in the war room, and yet everyone around them just doesn't seem to care at all, or is openly dismissive of them. It's really strange, and we really don't know these characters at all. They've mostly been background characters, practically cameos, and now that they show up, I'm not sure what we're really supposed to feel. Are we supposed to be excited about these characters? Or are we supposed to be just as disappointed as Bo is? Glimmer comments that at least the two of them have powers, which is more than she could say for herself. Her mother reminds her that not only does she not have her powers, she's also still glitching. Adora agrees with her, but adds that she doesn't want any of them fighting. She believes that She-Ra can do this on her own, and that's what She-Ra is meant for. I'm not sure that's exactly what Light Hope said. Light Hope said she's meant to keep the balance in Etheria, not necessarily to fight alone. Bo tells her that not even She-Ra can take out the Horde on her own, and Adora yells, "Then what good is she?" and storms out of the room. Adora goes outside to sulk, and Glimmer and Bo follow her, asking if she's okay. They also ask about what happened in the first one's temple. Adora explains that she met Catra there and thought she could convince her to come to their side, only to push her farther towards evil, and now she would be leading the attack on Bright Moon. And she continues to blame herself for everything that's happened up until this point. This is actually the first time Adora has ever mentioned Catra outside of Catra being on screen, which is about time. But I also think it was more Catra's anger that pushed her away than it was Adora. She tells them that Light Hope told her if she came back she would just be endangering her friends, and she tells them that Light Hope was right. Everything that's happening is her fault. Glimmer hugs her and tells her that she's got this and they've got her back, and the best friend squad hug it out. I don't think we're on the same page as the writers. I don't understand why Adora blames herself for everything. This whole thing started because Frosta let terrorists into the prom, Glimmer ignored those terrorists, Adora had to mount a rescue, and Entrapta decided to go back for the robot. And Catra's already made up her mind because she's been rewarded by the Horde ever since Adora left, whether she deserves it or not. What does Light Hope know anyway? She's out of touch. Everything that led up to this was the fault of other people, not Adora. Do the writers honestly believe that this was Adora's fault? Also, if Adora had stayed with Light Hope, Hope, then she wouldn't be there for the siege on Bright Moon. And they're aware that the Horde wants to destroy the Runestone, and if they're successful in destroying the Runestone, then the world would be out of balance. They've already lost Entrapta, and the only reason that the Horde has come this far is because of her experiments. Whether Adora stayed in the Crystal Castle or went back to her friends wouldn't change any of that. So honestly, being there for Bright Moon is the best course of action. And honestly, Lighthope was being pretty unreasonable with not wanting to fix Glimmer, considering the fact that she's part of that elemental balance. So Lighthope's motivations are hard to understand. I think the writers really should have smoothed this out, because there are all these plot holes that could have been avoided if they had just put more thought into this. But Glimmer takes Bow, Adora, and Swiftwind to a room where she's been hoarding weapons for the past few months without consent from her mother, so they can all gear up for the incoming battle. Queen Angela shows up and tells Glimmer that she knows she's been hoarding weapons. Glimmer tries to tell her mom that she can't just sit around while her home is under attack and all her friends are fighting, but Angela stops her and tells her that she knows. She says that she's been trying all this time to mold her into someone more like her, but she's too stubborn and hot-headed and brave, like her father. She gives Glimmer her father's staff and says that it's time that she passed it on. Glimmer tears up over this and they hug. I like that the two of them are sharing a moment over Glimmer's father. I think that Glimmer's father should have been more of a central part of her and her mother's relationship. A lot of the time, he didn't come up, even though it seems like he was a big part of what was causing the tension between the two of them. When he did come up, there were times that Glimmer was pretty emotional about it, but it also felt like there were just as many times that she was dismissive of his memory. Like in episode 4, when Perfuma says that the last Princess Alliance fell apart and what's gonna make this Princess Alliance work, Glimmer says that was our parents who failed. This is us. That just seemed very dismissive of her father's memory, and it was really weird. I think these are good ideas. The execution just isn't where it needs to be to make this emotional payoff work. This seems to be a pretty genuine moment. My issue is that when you have so many moments of the characters crying and hugging and being emotional, that it kind of cheapens more important moments like this one, where they're bonding over the memory of her father, and she's given this important inheritance from him. The Horde begins their attack on Bright Moon, so Adora transforms into She-Ra. She tells Bow and Glimmer to defend the castle, while she jumps in to attack the tanks that are advancing. The Queen says she'll keep the Moonstone lit as long as she can, while the others join the battle. While She-Ra is defending the castle against the tanks, she turns her sword into a shield to try to deflect their lasers, but one of them knocks her shield out of her hands and it falls into the water. This is pretty early into the battle and she's already lost her weapon. She can't find it because she's having vision problems. I guess she took a pretty hard hit to the head. When she's able to look up, she sees Catra. I think they had to take her sword away to make her and Catra be on more equal footing for when they fight. After some ex-best friend bans her, they start throwing hands and claws, but it cuts back to Swiftwind, Glimmer, and Bow. Glimmer protects the boys from a skiff when she runs into Scorpia, who says that her new accessories aren't going to help her. But Natasa and Spinnerella actually get to do something for the first time in the season, where Spinnerella forces them back a bit with her wind, and Natasa catches them in a net. Although despite the fact that her name is Spinnerella, and in the original she activated her powers by spinning around and dancing, this Spinnerella doesn't seem to do that. She kind of just floats there, or raises her arm a little and then the wind comes. I mean, the show literally called out the fact that their names are pretty obvious and tied to their abilities, but Spinnerella doesn't reflect that anymore. So why is she still called Spinnerella? The scene cuts back to She-Ra and Catra's brawl. She-Ra seems like she's already getting winded. Even Catra calls her out on it. This fight hasn't been going on for that long. And she's She-Ra. Why is she already getting tired? She fires back at Catra saying she thought she would be quicker after she throws a small rock at her. She-Ra tells Catra she should give it up because there's no way she's going to win this fight. Catra tells her that she's already made it farther than anyone thought she would. But a lot of that was because of her plot armor. It comes off like she's the writer's favorite, so it can be tough to really take her achievements that seriously. Catra does manage managed to get some pretty bad scratches on She-Ra, and She-Ra shoves her into a wall. After they separate, She-Ra says it's not over, and Catra says of course it's not over. She gives this whole villain speech about how it won't be over until Bright Moon falls, and everyone knows that their hero failed them. The thing is, she really should have been off screen for this whole villain speech. During the whole thing, she's clinging to this rock, and it would have been a lot more intimidating if she had just been off screen, and we didn't know where she was, but all we heard was her voice. It would have been more effective in that regard to portray the drama and dread that's supposed to be in this scene. She-Ra gets her second wind and tells Catra it's over after she gets the upper hand on her, but Catra asks if she's sure about that as the barrier around the moonstone falls. Glimmer sees that her mom is in trouble, so she rushes to get to her, only to be blocked by Scorpia, despite the fact that the last time we saw Scorpia, she was trapped in a net. So how did she get out of that? It kind of seems like this episode lost track of the characters while they were fighting. Like, after we see Scorpia and her platoon get trapped by Natasha, it cuts back to Catra and She-Ra, but we don't actually get to see anything else with Glimmer and her side against Scorpia. Like, it would have been interesting to see them teaming up with Natasha and Spinnerella, and also Scorpia maybe breaking out of the net and having them all brawl, but we didn't get to see that. And now Scorpia is just here with no explanation, and then she punches Glimmer in the face. I'm just saying, this could have been handled better. It cuts back to She-Ra, who's looking for the Sword of Protection, but she gets captured by some Horde soldiers who actually are doing something. Yeah, these nameless, faceless goons are actually capable of doing something. Too bad She-Ra doesn't have any leaf fans on her. That does seem to be their weakness. One of the Horde robots gets up to the Moonstone, and it blasts Queen Angela unconscious. The Moonstone powers down, and the sky gets dark. Glimmer sees this and she starts glitching again, and Scorpia gets distracted and says that her glitching is pretty. Glimmer used the glitching against Scorpia. You zapped Bo on accident back in episode 10, so just use this to your advantage. Catra tells She-Ra now it's over, and She-Ra passes out. But we know that's not true because there's still 10 minutes of the episode left. But back on the staircase, Glimmer and Scorpia continue fighting, and Glimmer manages to shove Scorpia off the staircase into the water with her staff. Swiftwind arrives to take Glimmer up to the Moonstone, although she was already halfway up the stairs, but the narrative remembered that he existed, so that's a plus. And the two of them take out the robot that was attacking the Queen. Bo, Spinnerella, and Natasha come to She-Ra's rescue, and Bo gives her back the Sword of Protection, which he found in the water. He asks her if there's any way they can still fix this, but they're surrounded by Horde soldiers. She-Ra apologizes to them, and they all hug. Considering this is their lowest moment, this is probably around the time you would expect the other princesses to show up and save the day. So the other princesses show up and save the day. But Mermista arrives in this triumphant moment where she puts out all the fires around the castle and washes away Catra and the rest of the Horde from our heroes. And Perfuma wraps up the Horde army in her vines. Catra manages to break through the vines and climb into a tank where she fires at the Moonstone. The beam hits the pillar that's holding the Moonstone up and it starts to collapse and fall over. But Frosta comes and uses her magic to freeze the pillar back into place, and also takes out a line of tanks in the process. She joins the group and doesn't apologize for being the catalyst for this entire situation to begin with. None of this would be happening if Frosta hadn't let terrorists into the prom, the same terrorists that Adora warned her about multiple times. I guess showing up is a start, but the last time these characters saw each other, Frosta trapped Adora in ice and was banning her from the kingdom. I just hope they address these issues eventually. Now that everyone's here, She-Ra lifts her sword and says, "For Etheria." This causes all of the runestones to react, and it magically fixes the weather and Glimmer's glitching problem. So now the only thing left to deal with is the Horde. Everyone teams up to fight them off, and I do like all of the princesses' team-up attacks. I like seeing everyone work together. I like seeing Glimmer teleporting around. I didn't care for Seahawk lighting his ship on fire again. They're really committed to this running joke. So they all combine their powers, and She-Ra lifts the sword again, which actually causes a reaction that's similar to when the elements of harmony are combined in My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, and shoots this rainbow blast at the Horde. They all start celebrating despite the fact that they can easily use this opportunity to start capturing Horde soldiers and the Force captains, but instead they let Scorpia and Catra escape. She-Ra even watches them go. Why not use Frosta or Perfuma to catch them? They celebrate that Bright Moon is saved and that the princesses are united. Although we do know that there are more princesses out there, since there were some that we didn't recognize in Light Hope's hologram. They all hug again, and I do like that Angela wraps her wings around them. But now Catra, Entrapta, and Scorpia have to face Hordak. Hordak says it seems that their experiment was a failure, but Entrapta disagrees with him, saying that she knows more about First One's tech than ever and that this is just the beginning. Catra says that she got them closer to conquering Bright Moon than anyone ever did, and the Whispering Woods is still in ruin, so Etheria is theirs for the taking. Guys, you got defeated by a rainbow. And the princesses are united. Just saying. So Hordak decides to promote Catra to his second in command, officially taking Shadow Weaver's place, and once again promoting her after a failure. But it is true that she's the most capable person in the Horde. Maybe next to Entrapta, but I think that she's happy with just tinkering. She's clearly not in it for the evil. She just wants the freedom to experiment. Then again, her experiments involve tampering with the natural order and hurting the planet, and she's completely aware of that fact. So maybe she is evil after all, and not just a reckless scientist. So that was the finale of season 1. Ultimately, it was just really predictable. Even back in episode 10 when they all split up, we knew that they were going to get back together for the finale. And I guess it is nice that they all showed up after the distress beacon was lit. But I do think they really need to work on the relationships in this series. Frosta is not friends with the other princesses, but they're all celebrating together as if nothing ever happened between them. To go from the last time they all saw each other in episode 8 to here without any kind of apology or acknowledgement of what happened, it seems like they skipped over a huge part in this relationship. Then there's Natasa and Spinnerella. They get to be a part of the big group attack, but they've mostly been excluded from this group. When they do show up to show their support, no one greets them and is excited that they're there, or makes any kind of effort to talk to them. Bo still doesn't know what they do, so it's not like they had any interactions off screen. I'm honestly not even sure why they were included in this season if they were just going to be relegated to cameos. They get to do a few things in the final episode, but Spinnerella only got one line. Honestly, if they were not here, I don't think much would have really changed. And that's honestly disappointing. I would really like to get to know these characters more, so maybe they should have been saved for season 2 if they didn't really have much to do with this season anyway. Honestly, I'd like to get to know all of the characters more. I feel like the only one that really had any meaningful writing was Catra, and that's pretty disappointing. Everybody else is pretty much one note. They're all basic hero types. Looking back on this season, and also all the advertisements and the talk building up to this season, I feel like the show was pitched to us in a way that didn't reflect what it actually was. The showrunners talked a lot about how they believed it was important to be inclusive with this show, with female and minority characters, and they wanted to empower people who watched it through their writing. But then here we have these two characters who are meant to be very inclusive being openly excluded throughout the season. And the same goes for the rest of the cast. They make a lot of very strange and reckless decisions and are ultimately pretty toxic to each other. We've gone over multiple examples of this with the way that they treat Bo, with the way that Glimmer treats her friends and her mother, Bo's treatment towards characters like Kyle, Natasa, and Spinnerella, and ultimately a lot of the leaders in this show fall very short or even fail at their job, or in some cases just don't even care, like Entrapta. We didn't watch this show for the reasons that the marketing was telling us to watch it. We watched the show because we're fans of the original and we wanted to see what this show would bring to the table, but also also, we really didn't appreciate the way that the marketing was handling talking about the original. And we also didn't appreciate a lot of the things that were being said about the fans of the original and also the critics of this show. Yes, a lot of the criticism wasn't necessarily constructive, but in a lot of ways, they were throwing gasoline on the fire. In the end, we just weren't impressed with this show. There were a lot of interesting ideas and potential shown, but the writing just didn't deliver. That doesn't mean no one's allowed to like this show. There is good stuff here, and if people are able to look past its flaws, they'll probably get enjoyment out of it. But I do think it's important to recognize this show for what it actually is, and not for what people want it to be. For fans of the original like us, we were hoping to get a She-Ra reboot, but that's not really what we ended up getting. Even the showrunner Noelle Stevenson said that she views this show more as a spiritual successor to the original. But personally, we didn't feel like any of the themes or the heart of the original ended up translating over to this one. Newcomers to this series don't have to worry about that kind of stuff, but we do worry that if these flaws aren't addressed, that their enjoyment might end up waning in the future. People may have been able to overlook all this for the first season, but if they don't step up their game and really fix this writing, it might end up being too much for viewers. But those were just our thoughts on season 1. What were your guys' opinions? We know that there are a lot of different views out there, and we would love to hear from you. We aren't quite done talking about She-Ra. Season 2 is coming out in April, and we want to talk about our hopes for season 2. But we'd also like to do more videos about different animation and comic books, and we have a lot planned for this channel. But thank you all so much for sticking with us during these reviews. We really appreciated all of your feedback, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone. Bye guys.